So we want to be seen in a certain way. So we all want this identity. We all want to be seen as valuable, right? To somebody or group of people. In relationships, of course, it's somebody that you're connected to or you want to be connected to.
Shelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. So good to be here.
So good to have you. You have had quite an incredible life and journey. You used to be a rancher, a trail horse guide, a volleyball champion, a fitness model, and now you're a love investigator. Your
I am a
framework
love investigator.
Your framework is really unique because it relies on self awareness and the success it plays in relationships. So let's start out by defining how one can even get to the self awareness.
Self awareness is all about how you operate in the game of life and love. And so many people think they know how they operate. But because of this framework and what I've discovered is that we're actually not aware at all. So we want to be seen in a certain way. So we all want this identity. We all want to be seen as valuable, right? To somebody or group of people. In relationships, of course, it's somebody that you're connected to or you want to be connected to. So we go around trying to project a certain identity upon people by what we do, how we say it. What we're not understanding is there's a concern and something going on underneath all of that's underlying all of our relationships. And I'm suggesting it's these four positions, northeast, south, and west, in the game of love. And the game of love is not about being a pickup artist and that kind of thing. It's really like a game. So if I ask you to go play polo, for instance, and I say, Mark, let's go out to the polo field and play polo. If you've never been on a horse, you have no idea what polo, you've probably seen polo, but there's no possible way you could actually do it without knowing how the rules, how the gameplay goes, how to ride a horse, what it all means. How do I win? How do I score? This game of love is happening underneath all of our relationships at all times, and we're just not aware of it, which is why we're not self-aware. We just don't understand how we come into each of our relationships and the concerns that we have when we go into these relationships. And each position has a very distinct biological concern that drives our actions, not only in life, but of course in love. And my whole subject is love because I love the subject, because life is about relationships. It doesn't matter what you do, who you are, your age, or where you are on the globe. It is all about relationships. And we all want it. We all want love.
We all do want love. The positions that you describe, north, east, south, you call it the four cross love framework. Before we deep dive into this, can you explain what they are and what it means?
So the four crossover framework is about the four positions and how we interact and engage in relationships or just in life in general. It's human communication. It's the interaction. It starts at the north position. So every idea starts at the north position. For instance, let's go have some dinner. That's the idea. That's ideation, right? And then we go to the east position. Okay, should we go have Thai, burgers, salad? We decide on Thai, right? So then that's all the exploration, all the possibilities. And then we actually go do the things. We go to south. That is execution. So it's ignition, exploration, execution. You go do the thing, you eat. And then you go to evaluation. Was it good? Did we like it? Would we come back? And so this cycle is happening 24/7, 365 in every way you can think of. And each person plays a position in that cycle. And so that's why these four positions are crossing all the time, in a sense. We're following this cycle, but you are going to run into a north, you're going to run into an east, a south, and a west. And we just don't understand that we are playing these roles, these positions in the game. We're not understanding that this cycle is happening and that we're crossing these positions. So that's why I call it four cross, because we're always playing our position. I call it our human operating system. So we're literally always seeing life from this perspective, from our position, and we're always playing this game in life. We're just not aware of it. Like literally, we don't have the playbook to the game of love. And I'm suggesting that I have found it through what I've discovered, what I've experienced, what I've been observing for the last 10 years as a love investigator. I have relationship after relationship, people in general, it's people. Every time I meet somebody, I try to identify their position immediately. And they're always giving me clues. Like I ask somebody a question, they're giving me a clue. I ask them about something in particular, like what concerns them, what bugs. Usually it's what bugs people in life is a clue as to their position. So I can go about navigating those positions or those relationships so much smoother. And I can listen for things about what's concerning them. And you avoid so much conflict and be offending people, or you can just learn how to navigate and go around this cycle much faster if you can quickly identify the positions of other people. Of course, I have the curse of knowledge. So I've been studying this for the last 10 years. So I can do it. But I want everybody to be able to do it because I think we can go about relationships, understanding and empathy and sympathy for people at such unbelievable levels. Like it's peace, harmony. We could actually understand people at levels I don't think ever before. So that's why I don't know if you can tell, I'm super passionate about it.
I love it. I love it. So let's talk about it, right? If I am listening to this podcast and I am somebody who's struggling with love, I want to know the skills. How does one go about it?
So I have a book coming out. It's called Love is Not Blind, You Are. And I go through it's a very structured scientific approach to love. And some people don't like that, but I think in a sense we have to go that direction because clearly we're struggling, right? And so if you go figure out, first of all, self-awareness. So what you want, what you value, where you want to go, who you are. You have to figure that out first. That's the whole self-awareness piece. And in my book, I go through a 6-point checklist to figure out this book is about picking a mate, but it really works in all aspects of life. So the first part is self-awareness and then positional awareness. So once you figure out your position in the game of love, then you start seeing, oh my gosh, these positions are obviously clearly happening right in front of me all the time. So then the second part is attraction. So for relationships, to be a peak performer in relationship, you have to recognize that this is going on. And the 4 attractions are physical, emotional, intellectual, and then positional. So you were attracted to the opposite position of us for a very good reason. They're filling that void or that part of us that we know we inherently aren't. So in a sense, they are completing us. It's the classic line from Jerry Maguire, I think you complete me or something like that. Is that the one?
Yeah.
But in a sense, they are, because they're taking, like as a North, you have a very different concern than a South. And you recognize that person, that South position is fulfilling that part of you that you aren't. So it's attractive. And they're exciting, engaging, and different in a way that you know you aren't. And it's like a survival mechanism in a sense. Same for East-West. We're attracted to the opposite, so North and South and East and West. So then the third part of the checklist is you have to have some similar interests, for sure. Not all, you don't have to have every interest the same. You have to have some similar values. And I go through a whole checklist of all these different things that you can ask and how you can ask it and how each position sees it. So if you know you're North, how you're going to go about asking questions to a person that you have an interest in. Then the fifth part is effective communication. We have to learn how to effectively communicate. And knowing these positions allows you to do that because you can start navigating and gauging how people are going to react. But most importantly, you start recognizing how you unknowingly come into these relationships. So these positions are biologically steering us in love and life, and we're not even aware of it. Some people are certainly more self-aware, and they're more that you can tell that they're thinking about it. They're like, gosh, I know I'm this way, and I can't have to look at life a little bit differently if I know this about myself. They know that they're attracted to the opposite for a reason, but we don't really know why. All of this is happening. People touch on it here and there, but we really haven't gotten to the root of everything. And I do believe this is the root of everything. Like our blood types, I believe we're born into these positions. I don't think you can change them. I don't think you can be more than one. The best thing we can do is learn how to read people. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, people don't change. They can try to alleviate certain concerns that they know and they inherently have. But we really don't change. And we can't. I know I'm a North. And now that I look back on my life, I recognize, wow, yeah, I have been a North my entire life. And which is why we're talking about relationships and struggle, which is why I struggled in relationships because I was so controlling. I was so commanding. And also because of what happened in my parents' relationship, I was bitter. Did I get through the whole checklist? Yes. And the sixth part is choice. You have to synthesize all this information, which is a lot. In my book, there's a lot of exercises. There's a lot of questions you can ask. There's a lot of self-reflection. But I think like with anything, if you really want to be good at something, you've got to do the work. You don't get good at something. You've been doing bodybuilding for some time now, and you realize how hard it really is. It's no joke. And you've done the research and you've looked at how do I do this? How do I make the best me? But it's taking you, I'm sure, some time, a lot of effort, a lot of research, and you've delved into the nutrition and the weights and what the sequence of weights and how you go about that and you've just the pictures, I've seen some of your pictures. Wow. If your relationship is important to you, you got to do the work. And I think so many people think, oh, love, you just fall into it and it's just this attraction and it's this zing. Yeah, certainly part of it is that for sure. Not denying that.
No, this is
Does that make
so
sense?
interesting. Absolutely. This is so interesting at so many levels, but I'm also a little bit torn, right? Because while we are understanding the importance of putting the work in and identifying who we truly are, developing that self-awareness, and then creating, being able to understand who our partner is for the sake of making our relationship better, we're also talking about how people don't truly change. So if I'm listening to this and I'm in a relationship and I've been married and I love my wife or I love my husband and I know he or she has the bestest intention, but it's just certain things she just can't change. Is there hope or is it just that we should just write it off because they're not going to change?
I think what you start realizing, which was huge for me, is I start becoming so appreciative of them. I start realizing they're that way for a very good reason. And thank God, because it's helping me. North and East are on offense. West are on defense. We're often attracted to the opposite. So you offense, defense, offense, defense. On offense, people are like literally a game. We're always trying to look into the new thing, the next thing, the big, all these different possibilities. It's like the prototype stage, right? Those people on defense are trying to protect us from going too far, doing too much. And so it's actually a beautiful dance. And once we start to realize that and appreciate that in our partner, you start appreciating them at a whole different level. And then you're not like, oh, at first we're attracted to the opposite because they're so different and so unique and so interesting to us. And then slowly but surely, they start driving us crazy because they're keeping us from ourselves. So which a lot of people say at a certain point in their relationship, oh, I lost myself. I need to find myself. Yes, because you're always trying to acquiesce or you're trying to always compromise to make each other happy. So you have this energy. But you find yourself like going too far. And that's when, like you said, it starts getting perturbing to the point, and then you're like, oh my gosh, they're never going to change. Yeah, they're not. But when you start having this self-awareness, the biggest factor in this is taking responsibility for your position rather than using it as an excuse. So rather than saying, oh, I'm a North, that's just the way I am, I'm the controlling jerk, I need to start realizing, okay, maybe I need to take a little bit different approach. Maybe I need to start considering the other people's ideas. I have all these ideas, all these ways of looking at things, but I need to start asking more questions. I need to quit thinking I'm right all the time. So what you're saying is, I think it's actually great that we don't change, because then we can start really nailing down how this is actually happening, what's really going on under these relationships. Because unfortunately, what I think personality tests do is they're this variation, the spectrum of ideas, and they don't really definitively tell us anything. So then we can make an excuse for everything.
I think it's fascinating how you described it, that instead of feeling hopelessness, that this person is just never going to change, it provides accountability and responsibility to be able to acknowledge the way we are and then accommodate in the best way we can, which essentially come down
100%.
to fixing a communication breakdown, right? A lot of
Yes.
relationships, they end up not going well because of conflicts that just seem unresolvable or communication breakdowns that just seem to not be able to, we are not be able to move past it.
Oh, percent. If you're an East and you're attracted to a West, East are energetic, charming, spontaneous, innovative. Well, a West is prudent, organized, precise. So if you can recognize that about each other and why you're attracted to each other, and it's literally a survival mechanism, you can start working with that, the way each other goes about things and appreciating it at a whole different level and recognizing, oh, that's why they're doing that. Oh, they actually really care for me. Or that's why what's bugging me about them. I've been watching this. So my book is based on the show Love is Not Blind, or Love is Blind on Netflix. And I watched, so that I take all those stories within my book and I demonstrate these positions and how relationships happen or don't happen, and what happens and why there's this conflict. I was just watching this show today, and it's called just the seasons, Married at First Sight. Oh my gosh. So these positions are so clear because they're put in a situation where they're married and then they go about figuring each other out. And so the stress and the anxiety is real. And that's when you really see these positions, when people are under stress and their survival concern is threatened. And there's this one guy who's in East who's 41, and his survival concern for freedom is so threatened. You can just see it, and he's anxious and he can't commit because he's so concerned about his freedom. Even though he got on the show, actually got married, and he's doing it, but you can just see it. So these shows are wonderful because it's like the wild kingdom of dating and relationships. Like, it's so apparent and right in front of you. But until you understand these positions and what's going on, it's not really. But then you can see how they're so confused and blind and just clueless. And it's fascinating stuff. It really is. And because of my parents got divorced when I was younger, this is just my mission. I would love to reduce just the conflict, the misunderstandings, the misinterpretation in relationships, and just this anger and frustration and divorce. It's hard. I'm not saying this is foolproof, but I think we could get significantly better at love, just loving each other, really. I don't know if my parents would have still gotten divorced. They were north-south, but I certainly think it could have. I do think that because they really loved each other, I knew that, which was why I was so blindsided by it. But I do think had they understood this and knew this from the very beginning of the relationship, it would have been a whole different story. 100%.
Was the defining moment that you think when you realized that perhaps something needed to be done?
That was the moment where I didn't even realize I started my love investigation. I'm a North, and in particular, I want to figure things out. My parents, when I was 17, my whole life changed. I was ready to go off to college. I had a volleyball scholarship. Life was good. And within that year, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And then not too long after that, we found out my dad was cheating on my mom. And I was so mad. I was like, lop off his head with a machete mad, like seriously mad. But I was like, so I started thinking about what happened, because my parents had been through a lot. They had this smaller ranch, and my dad had all these big ideas. We're going to do all these cattle, and we're going to then go get a bigger ranch, which we eventually were on. And my mom was just like, okay, let's do it. Totally supportive, wholeheartedly supportive. This is great. She loved the ranch life too. She loved animals. And then on this new ranch that we were on, a river ran through it. And the river would flood, and it would bring all these invasive weeds. And one in particular was tansy ragwort. They had to go out and spray every spring this tansy ragwort with Roundup. My mom was the one out there spraying. My dad was the one on the tractor. Not then, like I said, my mom ends up with breast cancer. There's been research done, and who knows if it's a cause and effect situation, but nonetheless, I feel like it was. I started thinking about everything they'd been through and all this. My mom was so supportive. And in hindsight, now I realize what was going on. My dad was just this driven North that had all these ideas, and my mom was just so supportive. And he just was unaware of his just self-centered. I was trying to think of a nice way to say it. I guess self-centered is the best way to say it. Just didn't consider people, especially my mom, who was just so supportive of him. So I think at that time, I was just like, what? How do I figure this out? Because I don't want to do this. And then I got jaded, and I was like, I don't want to get married. I don't want kids. I don't want anything to do with that. It's just, I think a lot of people go through this when their divorce is part of their life. And studies have shown children struggle with behavior issues, depression, anxiety after divorce. And I get it. I was one of those kids, and I was older, so I think I was mature, but not really. So yeah, that's when I really started my investigation into this unconsciously. But then 10 years ago, we ran into this man who was teaching my husband this framework. I call it 4-Cross Love framework. He called it something else, but I was listening along, and he was using it for business, John Cundiff. And he had studied anthropology, psychology, philosophy, and in particular, the Native American medicine wheel. And it has these components of it. So he put all this stuff together. In fact, I was talking to his wife about a month ago, and John has since passed on, but she was telling me it's all these different things. Because I was like, should I be telling people this is John's idea? It really wasn't. It was all these different things put together. But I listened along, and as I was doing that, I was taking in all this information, and I've honed it, reorganized it, renamed it, and offered it as this four-process love framework for people to figure out how to navigate the game of love. Because for me, that's how I saw it. It was the best way to explain human coordination and action that I could have possibly come up with. And so I named the positions, and I like I said, I finally organized everything and wrote a book about it. And so that's like then the next kind of level of this investigation that then I finally just put it into writing. And now I'm just so excited about it because I feel like I can really help people. At least I hope I can. That's my ultimate goal. I really want to help people with these relationships because like you were saying earlier, love is only everything.
Looking back at it, at your parents' relationship, you described your dad as driven and dreamer and wanting to do all the things, and your mom's personality as just such a supportive person. But because of the positional differences between them, it didn't work out and ended in divorce and all the things happened, right? Knowing what you know now, and we talked about how people don't really change, but it empowers them to be able to take responsibility. In an alternate universe, right? If you would be able to hand this book to your parents or maybe coach them through it, what would be some of the differences that your dad would carry out in his daily livelihood and his mom would carry out in her livelihood to be able to make the marriage work?
That's a great question because I think my dad, when it perhaps could have seen how selfish he was, like how it was so much about him and his ideas and how he took advantage of my mom's support and never really considered, I'm not saying never, I hate that word, didn't take my mom's consideration into mine. Like my mom had ideas too. She wanted to travel. She wanted to go do all this. And I think had my mom known this, she could have stood up for herself much more. She could have said, look, Russ, let's maybe take a different approach. Let's maybe look at it this way. And she stressed about finances the entire time because my dad was always taking it to the edge, just always pushing. And I think had they been more self-aware, they could have navigated that relationship and understood each other and talked about what was going on for them at much deeper levels, really have those deep underlying conversations that need to be had where we're just missing each other. We're just blind. We're just flying blind, hoping things work out. And for my parents, they were, gosh, what were they? 36, I think, when my dad was born. So they're older. And I think at that time too, the culture was a bit different. They were expected, just that's that matriarch, patriarch thing. And that's what was expected of them. It was just a little bit different culture. But I do think this could have helped them significantly see themselves and then have empathy for the other person and have those conversations and recognize what's really going on for each person in a very different light. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Sad to think that it could have been so different. It could have been so different. And I think a lot of people would say the same thing if they knew this. And hopefully moving forward, it can be different.
Yeah, there is just so many layers to this, right? Because they are so opposite is also the reason why they got attracted towards each other. So it's almost like the fact that the thing that brings you close together is also the thing that has the potential to burn you.
Oh my gosh, you couldn't have said it any better. Percent. Yes.
If you weren't that opposite, you wouldn't have that attraction and you wouldn't have that great potential to relationship. But because you have that attraction, there's also a chance that things might really fall apart if you don't pay attention to it. And what you're providing is essentially providing a scaffolding, providing a framework for that relationship, to that building to be together. And that's why it's so interesting what you're doing. Let's talk about your personal experiences. You talked about being a North yourself. You were a national volleyball champion. You were a fitness model. How did those aspects of your personality, of a competitor, of a winner, being disciplined, how did those aspects of your personality influence your relationship and love?
I'm extremely driven and black and white. And so it has been a struggle. And at the same time, I just like things the way I want them. So I get what I want because I'm so driven and I know that I need to do things in order to get what I want, which is why, I was an average volleyball player, but I got on a national volleyball team because I worked my ass off. I went above and beyond. And so that can be super helpful in a relationship relationship, but as a woman, it can be also, I can be very, what's the word, commanding in my relationships. And it can be stressful for my husband. He's actually an East, so he's on offense too. So we have battled. And without this, we've both said this, I don't know if we would have made it. We learned this 10 years ago, and we were married probably 4 years before that. And because I have all these ideas, he has all these ideas. He takes my ideas and tries to do all these possibilities with them. He takes out all my ideas and, oh, we could do this and we could do this and we could do this. I'm like, no, my idea was good enough. We're going to go with my idea. And then he's a talker. So we all learn differently. Norse learned by reading and researching and figuring things out. East learn by talking. They talk through things. They're big. They need to get things out and go through a process by talking it through, learn by doing stuff. They're very hands-on people. They're the makers. They're the construction workers. They literally use their hands and they make things. The West is the analytical. They research and go backwards in time and use legalese and information that's been in history. And that's how they learned. I've got 30 maps that explain each position and how they go about how they see life, their perspective, and with all these different scenarios and contexts. But where it has been super helpful is my husband and I laugh at each other so much because we're like, oh my God, would you quit being an East? Just stop already. And it's hilarious. He's like, okay, you're being so North today. I've had enough of you. And with my daughters, so I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old daughter. And they've learned this too in the last 10 years. And they use it in every single person they meet. We do it as a family, honestly. It's funny. We meet somebody, okay, so what position were they? And how do you think? And you can get an idea of how they're looking at life and how they're assessing you. Norths assess, East project, Souths assess, and West project. And it's sincerity or competency. So that's one of the maps that I was talking about. And so you can see how they're assessing you or what they're projecting when you meet somebody. And if somebody's assessing you, you can pretty much guess if they're North or South. The way they're dressed, the way they present themselves. Our daughters use it so they don't, my daughters just don't get into the girl drama or the teenage drama because they can avoid it by not getting influenced in those ways that those kids do because they're just fighting for identity. And that in that like 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, that's that point in life where we're fleeing the nest. We know it a little bit. We're still counting on mom and dad, but we have to create our own identity within this tribe of people. And that's where you get all that. They're trying to get up on the hierarchy, the social hierarchy. And so they do some awful things. I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm sure you've maybe been a victim of it. We all have in some way. But that's what's going on. We're battling for these positions in this hierarchy, and these positions do it in very different ways. And they learn to attract different people, different friends based on these positions that are going to support their need for this identity on this hierarchy. So I use it constantly. Children use it constantly. My husband uses it constantly in relationships in every way you could possibly think of. I can help people see what's going on. I had this East friend that I was having some issues at work, and I could tell who she was dealing with was a North. And she was very upset because East can be very emotional. And so she was upset by this North. It can be very straightforward and black and white and to the point. And I said, this is what you're dealing with, and this is why they're doing that. And she was like, oh, okay. And she could see, without her knowing her position, I could help her alleviate that concern for her. Yeah, I use it constantly every day in all my relationships, but especially my relationship, of course, with my husband and my daughters. And my sisters don't, I think they don't. My sister read the book and she's like starting to get it. But it takes so much time. It's such a nuanced thing. And I think that's been my number one struggle in trying to describe this and show it to people, which is why I finally wrote a book about it. And the book is really the first part because it really just is the fundamentals and the positions and the principle. It's just touches on the principles. My husband and I've written, I don't know how much information about this over the years, but yeah, it touches in every single level of my life all day long, because when I talk to my other daughter, who's an East, I can listen to her in a way and appreciate where she's coming from, why she's saying things, that she needs to talk. She needs to talk a lot. So I let her. I've learned patience, and I feel so listened to and appreciated because I've learned to be like, yeah, just get it out. Talk to me. Let me know what you're thinking. Where I think a lot of East, because they do have a tendency toward that, have been oppressed, told to be quiet. You talk too much, especially in our public education system, where you're told, sit down, be quiet, listen, and do what you're told. and be obedient. Oh, that's very difficult for an East. They're off dreaming, looking out the window, got to talk to people. So yeah, I just feel like it helps in every single relationship I have. I don't know what I'd do without it at this point.
That's the most interesting thing, right? Because when I heard about your book and I read a little bit about it, it first seemed like a book about romantic relationships. And then the next layer was it's about self awareness and understanding yourself. And then the next layer was it's really about understanding people. And then you all of a sudden realize we live in a world surrounded by people, so it affects every single relationship. So at the end of the day, what it is, it's really just a mechanism to be able to understand yourself and everybody around you. And if we can understand how everybody's working, including ourselves, it just creates such a harmonious living because so much pain and anxiety and stress goes just in the thought that I'm not understood or I'm not wanted, when the other person truly doesn't feel that way. They just don't know how to communicate it.
Oh my gosh, you're so good at synthesizing and putting things in. Yes, exactly what Mark said. Yeah. No, and I think the other thing that I think is so amazing about this is that in our culture, we're told you got to be all things. Like you got to be a Northeast, South, and West, essentially. And what this is telling, what the biggest relief for me was like, oh, I'm a North. I don't need to be an East, South, and West. I can't effectively be an East, South, and West. So let those people be those positions and learn how to work with them so that we can work together in harmony. And it's not all about me. And I don't feel less than. I don't feel insufficient. I don't feel like I'm not good enough because you start realizing you can be the best version of yourself you could possibly be from your perspective, from your position. And it's such a relief because you're like, oh, I need to be aware of those things. I need to be aware of those positions. I need to be aware of why those positions are so valuable. If you take the whole earth, the sphere of the earth, and you cut out a quarter of it, it wouldn't work. Same thing with all these positions. Each position is equally valuable. Each position is contributing, needs to contribute to the cycle equally. Now, this doesn't happen 100% all the time in this way. And every position can play the other positions. And we have to in life because we know we're only one person. But we also know, I think innately, that we don't play those other positions as well as somebody in those positions. And it's pretty apparent. So that kind of self-awareness was like the biggest relief for me because I think everyone feels in some way like they're not good enough. And this is just to me, no, you're exactly who you're supposed to be. And you're every bit important and helpful. And you can contribute from your position in such a beautiful way. So that was huge.
I'm a trained engineer. And as engineers, we want to understand how things work. So even when it comes to relationships, every single relationship I've been in, it's been the same way. I just didn't have the tools that you were presenting in the book. I wish I had the tools back then because life would be so much simpler. But I also know there's a segment of population that is not analytical. There is a segment of population that is listening to this and saying, but love is supposed to be this magical thing that just happens. Why must we sit there and evaluate people? What are you going to say to them?
Fine, that's fine. I don't care. Don't play the game. If I came to ask you and I wanted you to play basketball with me, you're like, no. I'm like, fine, don't learn to play the game of love and win. Don't live happily ever after. Die alone. That's your problem.
No.
I think what you just said is so true. You're like, innately, that there's all these four positions. And I think we all do. We're just not aware of it. We're just not. And now we can be. And if you don't want to play, I don't care. I'm tired of fighting people that you're always going to have people like that. Always, no matter what you do. And it's totally fine. You're not going to please everybody.
Yeah, and the way I look at it, knowledge is a good thing, whether we choose to use it or not, or at what extent we use it. So understanding how this works doesn't necessarily take the magic away. It just empowers us with certain tools and techniques that helps us understand and evaluate a situation. Because so many times has it happened in my life and people I know, they're confused. And like, how did she forget my birthday? How did she not know that I wanted this? Or why would she do that? And that confusion just leads to this whole rabbit hole of thinking where it can go anywhere. If we had some tools to evaluate just those specific moments, to me, that's good enough.
Yeah. What you'll start realizing once you get into this is that the magic happens at completely different levels because then you start really seeing how your partner is viewing life. That is fascinating because, like you said, there's all this misunderstanding and misinterpretation. I call it blind upset. So blind upset is a chasm between what was said, how it was meant, how it was heard, how it played out, and how it makes each of us feel based on our positions. And that can be a huge chasm. Like you said, one person thinks this thing, the other person thinks another thing, And that's not even how you meant it. That's not even what you meant when you said it, but they're taking it a completely different way. And certain positions have a tendency toward drama and making things exciting and fun, and they create it because that's what they're comfortable in. And so as a person on the opposite of that, you're like, oh my gosh, that's not what I meant at all. That's not how I said it. And so you can start to see that this is going on, and it's so enlightening. It's such a relief. It's listening to a podcast the other day, and this person was talking about how she'd gone on this big excursion where it's like 1,200 miles. I can't remember what the Appalachian Trail. And she ran into this guy. He was saying how, what's the one thing that you learn? He goes, you carry your baggage along the way. And she took it as, because she's like a inspirational speaker, and she took it as, yeah, we do carry our baggage along the way in life, and it piles up on this huge backpack, and all of a sudden you have a whole motorcycle full of baggage. And I'm like, no, you don't have to have all that baggage. You can relieve yourself of so much baggage, because then you start realizing your concern, what's going on for you, and why you have the baggage. And then you're like, oh, if that's it, I can let that go. Oh, if that's what she meant, or that's how she was looking at it, oh, I can let that go. I'm okay with that. Yes, get rid of the baggage. It can be burdensome, extremely burdensome.
Yeah, there is a very famous quote by somebody who was probably super duper smart, who said something like, when an author writes a book and is done writing the last line, in a sense, the author passes away, right? Because now the book is open for everybody for their own interpretation. And when we were doing research for this book, we were fascinated by this book. And that's why you can tell how much of a fanboy I am just talking about it, because I'm extremely intrigued by relationships. This book has so many layers. And I think the last point that you just mentioned about baggage, it almost ends up, this book is about forgiveness. This book is about forgiving yourself, and is also about forgiving the partner who you truly love. But sometimes things just happen that you just can't let go. But the book gives you the tools and the understanding to understand, okay, why did this person behave this way or act this way? To be able to let go of some of that baggage, and then be able to redefine the relationship through a different lens, which is just going to be a relationship 2.0 version, because you have a much better understanding of that. So we love it.
Wow. Yeah, that was huge, Mark. I need to write that down. That was really profound, because it really is about forgiveness. And we struggle with that so much because we're so concerned about ourselves.
And that's what it
Wow.
is. Like, it's heartbreaks and bosses and relationships and friends. At the end of the day, the lasting feeling is always, how could she have done this? How could she do
Yeah.
this? How did he do this? This book is a gift. This book is truly a gift. We are lucky to be in a place that we get to meet a lot of authors, and they write a lot of meaningful things, and they're all wonderful. But very rarely do we come across books that have such deep and vast impact. This is not just a book about love. This is a book about relationship. This is a book about parenthood. This is a book about friendship, sibling feelings, and above all, acceptance and forgiveness. Before
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
else, is there anything else that you want to tell the listeners? Any piece of advice that is specific to the four cross framework that could potentially improve the relationship?
I think based on what you just said is we're all feel guilty in some way, shape, or form about some part of our behavior at some point in our life. And I just want to tell people it is not your fault. It's not your fault. It's impossible to play the game of love effectively if you don't know the rules. I want to get over that guilt of fault, and that it's just that we're blind. And yes, you can make bad decisions. Yes, we do make bad decisions. But if you don't know how to play, good luck. Yeah, I would love to say that my last thing is learn this, figure it out, take the time, do the work, and recognize that it may not be your fault now, but you need to take responsibility for it and move forward.
Of us go through life just being observers. Things happen. We just say, well, it just happened, and we move on. Some people take those observations, study it, and come up with some type of inferences. And then there are other people who take those inferences and create something with their blood, sweat, and tears for 10 years and put it out there for the world just for the betterment of it. There is no better example of the type of personality you have, given the amount of work that you've put into it. You're a gift. Your book is a gift. And it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. I can't wait to see the success of this book and talk to you again.
Thanks, Mark. You can go to my website, fourcrosslove.com, and I offer every Friday I send out a love letter, and you can go get the love letter, and I base it on these positions and how you can be a better partner in the game of love. So if you want to just start with that, it's fantastic. There's some resources on there. Yeah, I just keep putting more stuff up. There's a blog with the past love letters. So it's all about love for me.
I love it. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Mark.